We're going to go to Jerusalem now, and Bibi Netanyahu is the former prime minister of Israel, and he joins us from there, where it is already nightfall, obviously. Mr. Netanyahu, Secretary of State Colin Powell has also been in touch with the Israeli government, Shimon Peres, the foreign minister, and Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. He said he also talked today with Yasser Arafat, trying to achieve some kind of a stand down, if not a complete ceasefire, because there have been more episodes of violence in your country, exchanges between the PLO and the Israeli military. What are the chances of that happening in the context of this terrorist attack in America?
Well, I think that it's not exchanges, it's attacks, terror attacks in which innocent civilians, innocent Israelis are killed by Palestinian terrorists, including suicide bombers. It's important to understand that Yasser Arafat's PLO land, if you will, the PLO authority and its territory, is simply a branch of this larger terrorist tree. There is a terrorist empire, a network of terrorists that includes, as Andrea Mitchell said, the Afghanistan and the Taliban part of it. It includes Iran, it includes Iraq, a few other Middle Eastern regimes, Arafat's own Palestinian Authority, which harbors groups that have cooperated and cooperate today with Bin Laden, Fatah, Arafat's own movement, the Islamic Jihad, the Hamas terrorist movement, and Hezbollah in Lebanon. This is what I may call the terror network. And therefore, while it is vital that Bin Laden, as it appears that he is the one who perpetrated this, should be attacked and eliminated without a doubt, it is important to understand that he's only the squadron leader who dispatched the kamikaze pilots. You have to get at the aircraft carriers. You won Midway, you won the Pacific War when you sunk the carriers. You didn't go after the individual kamikazes alone. You went after the facilities that enabled their operation. And in this case, I think President Bush is absolutely right in saying that it is not only the terrorist organizations that have to be wiped out. You have to dismantle the whole terror regimes that make this possible.
You're not suggesting, are you, Bibi Netanyahu, that the United States in its war on terrorism goes directly after the PLO as well?
Oh my God. Oh my.
Can you hear me, Bibi? Oh, I'm sorry that we've lost the audio at that time. Some very provocative statements from Bibi Netanyahu, who is the former prime minister in Israel and is still aligned with the current government. Let's go to NBC's David Bloom now. NBC's David Bloom in Lower Manhattan. We're going to go to General Norman Schwarzkopf. As everyone knows, he was the commander of the Allied forces in Operation Desert Storm. General, we just had on Bibi Netanyahu as the former prime minister of Israel. As you know, he is a man who takes a very strong position against the PLO and terrorism. He said it's not enough for the United States to get Osama bin Laden. He described him as a squadron leader. He said you've got to sink the aircraft carriers. He used the metaphors from World War II. You won in the Pacific because in the Battle of Midway, you sunk the big carriers of the Japanese fleet. And he was suggesting that we'll have to go after wider organizations, and even suggesting that we'll have to go after the PLO. That changes the equation considerably.
Well, you know, obviously, he's correct that the Bin Laden organization is just one of many terrorist organizations. I'm not too sure that any of us know that there is a central direction of all terrorist activities. An awful lot of those organizations operate independently. We get Bin Laden, you've got one of them, and probably one of the most prominent. But as he said, quite correctly, there are several others out there.
Were you encouraged today by the statement of the Pakistani government?
Yes, yeah. Don't forget, the Pakistanis, some of them participated in Desert Storm. They were friends, good friends, I would say, when I was the commander of Central Command. Obviously, since then, there have been a lot of changes, and they are not as good a friend, but I was very encouraged by their comments, and I sincerely hope that they follow through.
Let's talk in the broadest strokes about military operations. If we do have to go into that part of the world and we need a land base, which country makes the most sense?
That's a tough question. The country that makes the most sense is the one that lets us come in there and operate freely out of it.
Do you think that Pakistan conceivably could do that?
I think it'd be very tough for the Pakistanis to do it. I'm not too sure that they have the facilities, the extensive facilities that we need to do the job.
What about?
It could.
Go ahead.
You started to say, what about?
Well, what about north of there? What about going into a place like Uzbekistan?
Could work well. It's one of those things. Don't forget, in Desert Storm, we operated primarily out of the Gulf states, but at the same time we were operating out of Turkey and the states north of Iraq. So, the more the merrier as far as that is concerned. As many bases you can get, you want to use, because you want to build up your logistics supplies. You want to be able to hit them from all sides, so, I wouldn't discount anybody. I'd like to have as many, we would obviously like to have as many bases as we could possibly get.
And as Andrea Mitchell was just reminding us, it was the U.S. presence in Saudi Arabia during Operation Desert Storm, in which we were trying to save that country from being overrun by Iraq and liberate Kuwait, but it was the U.S. presence in there that so enraged Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, but you also got to remember that Osama bin Laden was a recipient of U.S. aid in his battles in Afghanistan, so he's being rather selective in deciding when he likes us and when he doesn't like us.
All right, thank you very much, General Norman Schwarzkopf. We're back now with Bibi Netanyahu, the former Israeli Prime Minister and the former ambassador to the United Nations here in the United States, a very familiar figure, of course, to American television audiences. Mr. Netanyahu, I just want to pick up on what you were saying when you were talking metaphorically about aircraft carriers and the United States having to get them if they're going to win in this war against terrorism. You began that statement by talking about the connection between the PLO and terrorism. You're not suggesting that the United States is going to have to go after the PLO as well.
No, I think we can handle that. But President Bush said correctly that you have to root out not only the terrorist organizations, but also the regimes that harbor them and give them safe haven. As a point of fact, Arafat's part of this terrorist empire is one of the big factories of suicide bombers. He's got kindergarten camps, summer camps, that teach little Palestinian children to become suicide bombers. So he's preparing not only the suicide killers of today, but the suicide pilots of tomorrow. But that is an issue I think that we can handle. The main point that I want to stress is that we don't approach this as a small problem of Israel or a small problem of America vis-a-vis bin Laden, because what we have here is something far worse. In 1995, I wrote a book called Fighting Terrorism, and I said that if we don't arrest the tide of Islamic militant terrorism, militant Islamic terrorism, then the next thing that will be is not a car bomb in the World Trade Center, but a nuclear bomb. Now, it wasn't a nuclear bomb. It was a 350-ton conventional bomb. But I'm sure you don't doubt, and nobody who listens to us now doubts, that if these maniacal movements and the regimes that support them develop nuclear weapons, they will use them. And then you're talking about not the horrendous casualties. And by the way, it breaks the heart just to listen to the stories that you gave earlier. Now imagine that the horrific toll, as horrific as it is today, would pale in comparison to hundreds of thousands or millions of casualties. What is important to understand is that you have to dismantle the entire terror empire, and especially before its main practitioners, the terror states of Iran and Iraq, acquire nuclear weapons. And this, I think, has been a wake-up call from hell. It is telling us, you have the power now to act, summon the will, because the terrorists have the will to destroy America, to destroy freedom, to destroy all of America's allies and all the democracies, Israel being simply on the front line. They have the will, but they don't have the power.
But simultaneously, to get back to my original question, should the United States become more deeply involved in trying to arrange a temporary truce, at least in your part of the world, between the PLO and your government?
Well, it's not a question of a truce. Arafat's true colors were revealed for those who want to see, and it's caused a massive shift of opinion in Israel. I would say unprecedented unanimity, even from the most conciliatory Israelis, because they realize now that he doesn't want a state next to Israel. He wants to eradicate Israel and uses terror to sap our will and hit us. In many ways, what you have here are two parallels. Osama bin Laden represents an Islamic militancy that wants to reverse history. They never accepted the rise of the West and its primacy in the world and the retreat of Islam. They want to reverse that, and therefore they have to destroy America in their fantasy. And to do that, they will attack America again and again. They have a constant intention. They may not be able to destroy America today, but they think they can bring it to its knees, and once they acquire nuclear weapons, they'll destroy America. Make no mistake about it. Yasser Arafat is more modest in his goals as part of this family. He wants to merely destroy Israel. But we have to get the entire terror network when there is still time. And nothing that you will do with Arafat, giving him the hills above Tel Aviv, is not going to make him stop. And he's quite irrelevant in this respect.
Bibi Netanyahu, thanks very much for being with us.